Well, yeah, very briefly I can because that's about all I would know about it. But yeah, the non-wire technology, I mean, it's not so much technology, it's really power management. There's a couple different components to it. One is, I mean, I don't know how many of you understand why they need this power line. Basically, the population in this area has like doubled, I think, in the last 40 years, which is how long that power line's been in this area, and it's just overtaxed. And one way to deal with that is by using less energy. And so one part of there's several parts to this, but one part is to what extent can we as a community be more energy efficient and reduce our demand? Because if we're not using as much energy, we don't need as many new power lines. So that's one part of it. So the study that's going on is looking to see how much energy efficiency can we get out of this community. Another part of it deals with, and it gets very tangled, but there is power moving all over this region. And sometimes the power plants in this region are sending power down to California. And sometimes we have wind farms in eastern Washington sending power over here. And sometimes this area is a net, needs more power coming in, and other times we're shipping it out. And one part is involved is instead of having so much power on these long distance power lines, can we redirect this power in ways that we're not clogging it? And what they basically end up doing is BPA would pay generators, power generators in this area, not to produce energy, and let that energy be produced by somebody else in eastern Washington or southern California, so as to avoid that extra energy having to go down these power lines. Basically redistributing the load, and by doing that, they can reduce the need for another power line. Very tangled thing, and which is why it's going to take some time. Just because it's tangled doesn't mean it's not possible. It means it's going to take them a while. There's a lot of different interest groups they have to make sure it can be accommodated. There's power generators, there's power users, there's PUDs, and other interests as well. So that's the sort of thing they're going to be looking at, and that's about all I can tell you in a few minutes.
A question for a lawyer. I was just wondering, with the right-of-way on our property, it would take out probably a third of our property, and because there's like 40 feet on the other side, which is unusable. How does that go for property taxes then, on a right-of-way? I don't know anything about that part. Do you know anything about property taxes?
Yes.
And other things?
So when the county is, so the question is about how the right-of-way does cross the property, how does that affect your property taxes? Your property taxes are a function of the value of your property. The county will take into account the impact on the value of your property caused by that right-of-way. So it's basically the same assessment that the court or the BPA would do if that right-of-way has reduced the value of your property, not just because you can't use 150 feet below the towers, but it also has rendered useless 40 feet over here. That all should be taken into account by the county assessor, and your property taxes should go down as a result of it.
Does BPA then pay the other part, or does the county actually lose property taxes because of right-of-ways?
I believe the county will actually lose property taxes because of the right-of-way.
All lose.
Right.
We all lose then.
And well, actually, no, yeah, because the value of the total property in the county has been reduced, everybody's going to pay a little bit more to make up for that.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jeff Vescu. I appreciate you coming down here to talk to us today. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
There's been several different issues brought up about wetlands, the EIS statement on how to approach waving off BPA's lines through our area here. Could you tell us what the most effective, as far as cost benefit right now, how you would prioritize a defense against lines coming through our area? Just an overview, if you would. how you would start a process like this. You've got several different groups. I think we're all in the same boat as wanting to keep them out of our properties. But how would you start the process if you just address that for me? I'd appreciate it.
Well, I mean, the start of the process is here today, I guess, in one sense. When I start working on a case like this, I do an evaluation of what the different options are. So the first step would be for me to do a survey of what those options are in the legal arena, political arena, otherwise, and then come back to the group and say, okay, here are your options. And there could be 3 different or 10 different things you could do. And each of them comes with a price tag. Each of them comes with different sort of effectiveness, how effective different things are going to be. And then the group needs to decide. Okay, they may say, hey, we don't care how much money this costs. We're going to sign up for all 10 of those things. And some of them are long shots, and some may only help a little bit. Others are going to maybe help a lot. But we're going to not leave any stone unturned. We're going to do it all. Another group might say, well, actually, money's pretty scarce right now. We can't afford to do all that. We're going to pick option 1 or option 2. So we go through that sort of decision-making process as a group, figuring out what the options are and what the next steps are going to be. And then it tends to evolve. Frankly, it tends to evolve over time because we're not playing against a static playing field.
Okay, you'll expect to be approached by a group of people, not any specific set of individuals, or how would you expect to be approached by a better way for BPA or one of the groups that's involved?
I mean, it can happen. It could be an individual committee, 2 people, 5 people, 100 people. That's up to the individuals involved how they organize themselves. That's not my business. I may have recommendations to them. If somebody approaches me and says, "I'd like to do this," I might say, "Well, here's a good way to get yourselves organized." But ultimately, it's up to the individual or the group of individuals to decide how they want to organize themselves.
We're talking about a line that is for release. So it's something that will be presented to them. Is that an engineering firm? Is that a lawyer firm that actually presents to the BPA the other option, or is it individual?
Yeah, well, it would depend. The more work you put into developing an alternative option, the more credibility it will have and the more seriously BPA will look at it. If you just, if Joe or Jane Smith goes home to their kitchen and draws a line on the map and sends it in and says, "Why don't you look at this?" It's not going to get a lot of consideration. On the flip side, if you had $50,000 to spend on engineers and wildlife biologists and lawyers and to develop it, and then submitted that and said, "Look, this really is real," that's going to get a lot more attention. And if you got somewhere in between those two, so the more effort you put into it, the more credibility it's going to have.
Do you know who usually submits it? Is it usually a lawyer sort of situation submitting it to BPA, or is it usually like what they're asking? Is it an engineering firm that's usually
Well,
who do they
it varies. I mean, because it depends on the nature of the project being proposed. But on a case like this, I think you'd want a combination of an environmental planner would probably be a good place to start. Somebody who knows how to go about locating things like this.
One question I had was, and I got this from my insurance agent, they're talking easements for this line project. Along the right-of-way, let's say somebody on their four-wheeler has an accident. BPA is on the hook for that because it's a right-of-way. Now, if it's on an easement, a BPA easement with towers and stuff below, if there's an accident, the injured party certainly probably is going to sue BPA, but I, as the property owner, am probably going to be on the hook for legal fees as well. There is no, as I understand it, hold harmless if you have an easement on your property, right?
Well, so that's what I was talking about in terms of negotiating the fine print of these agreements, is to get hold harmless indemnification language in there so that you come out completely scot-free in that situation. And that's a hard thing for one individual to negotiate. That's where you really have power in numbers. If you can say, I'm representing 100 people, you want to take 100 people to court over this, or you want to write this language so that everybody's happy?
A moment ago, we were talking about right-of-way versus easement. Can you clarify this is a difference?
Well, I think those terms get a little fuzzy, but I think it was being used in the sense of a right-of-way, meaning that the BPA owns the real estate. They actually purchased that real estate from the bottom of the earth to the moon. Whereas an easement, you still own the real estate. They have a right to come across it. You pick, yeah, if they buy a right-of-way so that they own the property, you obviously, it's not your property, you don't pay any taxes on it. If it's an easement, it's still subject to property tax, but the value of that property is going to be greatly reduced because it's greatly limited. Now, it's going to vary. If you own a farm, we saw some of those pictures of farming going on under the power lines. The assessor may come out and say, well, yeah, you got a power line there, but it hasn't really impacted your use of the property very much. I don't think it's impacted the value of the property very much, and you may not see much of a reduction. If you're in another setting where it's really impacting your ability to use the property, then your taxes should go down a lot. Should, right.
I just have a clarification. I think I know the answer to this, but I want to ask anyway just to be sure. So one of the proposed lines is not likely to end up on our property, but very, very likely to end up on our neighbor's property, which means the tower is essentially pretty close to our home as well.
Moving over your property.
Exactly. Am I correct in my assumption that there would be no financial reimbursement for us if it was not on our property?
That's typically the case, although there may be exceptions, and I would not rule it out without looking at it closely. But
my biggest concern is fish and wildlife and habitat. How much proof do we really have to make that work for us? I mean, a dozen reports, 500 reports.
Well, a report of what? It depends what impact to fish or wildlife you're talking about. If you're having impact to habitat that is relatively common habitat, it's not going to be of great significance. If you're having impact to very rare habitat, then it's going to have a lot more significance. It doesn't matter how many reports you have so much as what the reports say and whether they are credible reports.
Steelhead, it's such a big...
Right, okay, but you can say there's steelhead.
If we go to the county, they go, BPA, I don't care what we all are doing here.
Right, but what you have to do, it's not enough to just say there's steelhead in this creek. You have to link the project to an impact to those steelhead. So you have to show how building this power line is going to impact the steelhead in the creek. Now, if you can show that, now you've got something to work with. But if you just have a power line a couple hundred feet in the air crossing a creek that has steelhead in it, you may have a hard time persuading a county commissioner, a BPA, or a judge that this makes any difference.